loud dogs or annoying husbands in the back or anything like that. So, but please do just keep yourself on mute. That'd be great. Questions, we are encouraging questions throughout, but what we are going to say is if you've got a question, please do pop it in the chat because my wonderful colleague Emma is going to kind of moderate those. So if there's something that you just want to ask there and then you think I can't say this to you and I might forget it, please pop it in the chat and we can revisit it if it's still relevant. But we are going to have that designated question and answer session at the end. So we're going to make sure we do allow time for that. You are being recorded. So if, probably like me really, if you hate the sight of your own face on a Teams call, please do just feel free to turn your video off. That's absolutely fine. But then all we'd ask again is if you do want to interact, ask a question at the end, please do just pop that back on. And like I say, we're a welcoming bunch. We are here to learn today. I know I'm going to learn a lot and I'm going to explain it in a minute why this kind of topic has been brought to our attention, but there's no such thing as a silly question. We want you to get loads out this hour. So how it's structured today, 30, 40 minutes. We've got a couple of guests that have really got some expertise on this topic that are going to talk you through it and give you some tips. But then at the end, please do ask those questions. And again, there's questions we can take onto our LinkedIn group as well if we don't get a chance to get to them. So quick overview for today. So like I say, this is more of an information and learning session. So in the past, we've had kind of drop-ins. This is really a session for expanding your knowledge base. We've got Staffline and we've got Smart Environmental Solutions. So two amazing companies that are working in this space on a daily basis. And like I said, we encourage you to really reach out and get those questions across. Just quickly, this topic for me has arisen from our chart mark. So again, another push for our chart marks. If you're an SRAG member, you haven't done your chart mark assessment yet, please do, because this was a topic that came out of conversations and discussions as part of those chart marks. So I'm not going to give away all of Jade's highlights, I promise, but there was a conversation with Jade and it really made myself, I think it was Emma in the room, we really came away from thinking, wow, we did not know that. We did not know the scope and the, how big this is. So we kind of really came off the back of that call thinking, we need to get this across to our members. We need to get this across to businesses to learn from this. Right, I am going to get our first speakers, and it's a bit of a tag team, so I'll let them introduce themselves. But I'm going to get our first speakers kind of up front and center. I will stop talking. So yeah, over to Sarah and Chris from Staffline. So please do unmute yourself, guys. Come on in.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing?
Very well.
Very good. So just to introduce myself, I'm Sarah Bopperam. I'm the compliance manager at Staffline, and my colleague Chris is a compliance investigator who has a wealth of knowledge as he's ex-police, ex-GLA officer. So we do rely on him quite a lot to charge up a lot of our investigations, but it does mean that we have quite a lot of awareness and experience, unfortunately, in this area. But fortunately, Staffline persists in trying to find it and rooting it out and making sure that we try and close as many doors as possible to opportunities. So who will take your whistle-top tour through our little presentation?
And Sarah, please just say next slide whenever you're ready.
Next slide, please.
Brilliant.
So just a quick agenda. Just going to run through what modern slavery is and the scale of it. I'm hoping that some of you might have a flavour of what it is, and we'll try not to bombard you with the same statistics. We'll run through some exploitation impacts and how it infiltrates businesses, some of our shared experiences, and then how we reflect and learn from those cases that we experience, and ultimately the joys of the legal and compliance requirements. Next slide, please. So for those of you that haven't come across modern slavery, it is not the archaic, people being sort of shoved on ships and sold in marketplaces, but it happens all the time, and it happens right in front of your nose when you're not aware of it. Unfortunately, humans still have a cost on their heads. It's estimated that 50 million people globally from the ILO in 2022 were in slavery, and 28 million of those were in forced labour. So if you think that's 2 years ago, that number will have increased. Anti-Slavery International have given a statement on what they believe modern slavery is, but for us, it is those that are sort of forced into debt bondage, into domestic servitude, they're threatened with violence, They have verbal threats to their families, and they ultimately have their documents withheld or controlled in a way against them. They'll often be controlled with substance abuse as well. So it's something to look out for. Don't just assume that someone that turns up in front of you that might look like they have a substance abuse issue, that it's of their own making. This could be something going on behind the scenes. Estimated in the UK, just under 2,500 police investigations are going on currently, which is the significant amount. The problem being that modern slavery doesn't have a very clear start line, and it doesn't have a very set line of agenda. It's complex, it's entwined with so many other types of crimes, so it's really hard to identify. And it is really relying on your gut instinct and knowing the people that you work with and work alongside. There are generally three key aspects in modern slavery, and that entwines with their recruitment, the exploitation, and transportation of those individuals. It often crosses multiple countries and it involves multiple perpetrators. So as that statistic there says, 5.4 people in every 1,000 are victims of modern slavery globally, which is a staggering amount when you think about it. What was quite shocking for Chris and I is to see that in the top 3 perpetrators and victims, Britain comes really highly. I think we get complacent that, we're well educated, we're quite a wealthy country, and yet there we are at the top of the list of perpetrators and victims. And it is quite common that people from the same country will be the perpetrator of the victim. So it's something to look out for. Not always, but it is a common trait. Next slide, please. So how do you sort of, protect your own business? How do you sort of look after yourself? So we know Staffline is a target. We are a business that recruits thousands of people. So that makes us an instant target of how people can infiltrate us. Can they go under the radar? It's large volume, it's a busy environment. So if people are in the midst of Mother's Day, and it's, flower season, can they get somebody under the radar without us noticing? Can they get 10 people? Can they infiltrate us in lots of other ways? So it's actually being critical of your own business, knowing the weaknesses and thinking about how you can sort of stop them. So as I put there, why would your company or organisation be a target? What can you do, and what would you do if you had a criminal mindset? They often think that the workers that they send in will get lost in the mix. If we look at old cases that have happened, they'll often try and get somebody within the organisation so they can be an inside job, and they will then know the company's weaknesses, they'll know the processes, they know the way in which people will get recruited. And obviously this is a significant weakness for us. We need to have trust in our staff, we need to know that our teams work together. So it's, again, making sure there's good communication with the team, making sure that your teams are, work closely together, that they've got people that sort of, do some due diligence on them. A lovely compliance team, for example. And quite a staggering figure, the Home Office in 2018 estimated £27.2 million was lost in output and time due to modern slavery. Again, that's a figure that can only have gone up in the last couple of years. So it is significantly damaging to your business. If you do have an illegal worker now, that's up to £60,000 per person. The loss in trade, the reputational damage, and ultimately, if the media gets hold of it, that is not attention that you definitely want. So it is something that we have to be, mindful of. It pays to have that due diligence in your business. The estimated cost of modern slavery in the UK in March 2017 was between 3.3 billion and 4.3 billion. So those are staggering amounts of money, and it doesn't really factor in the emotional or physical harm to those individuals. And cases are going to court for costs suffered by victims, and we can't put a price on what they've experienced. So it's making sure that we protect our workforce. Next slide, please. So these are 4 headlines from the last 30 days to give you a taste of, what we want to be avoiding. Scottish fishing have had some human trafficking issues. That's going to be made into a film. Boohoo, unfortunately, keeps sort of hitting headlines over the years for some of their modern slavery concerns, and they have obviously brought into highlight the textile industry needs closer inspection. Milton Keynes, £15,000 for one worker. And it's something that perhaps, I don't know that business. I don't know what their processes are. I don't know what their due diligence is. Is it something that they've had an insider? Is it something that they have been a bit lackadaisical on? But it's just making sure that you've got processes and policies in place, that you keep checking, you keep communicating, and you keep educating everybody. Next slide, please. So, shared experiences. And this is where I'm going to hand over to Chris.
Thank you, Sarah. Just like Sarah said before, my first experience of modern slavery was as a police officer in the darkest depths of Derbyshire, where response driver, I came across a young man who was running about the street at 3 a.m. with just his jeans on, who had been really badly beaten up, and stopped, checked him out. Long story short, it became apparent that he had escaped a house with 25 other young men living in a 2-bedroomed house. He had been severely beaten because he refused to go to work that day for a car wash company. And he had no documentation, because as he arrived in the UK, his documentation was taken off him and he was shipped to deepest, darkest Derbyshire, put in a house with 20 other people, and then put to work, saying that he couldn't get his passport back until he earned a certain amount of money. This amount of money went up every single month, so he could never reach it. So even though that was human trafficking, modern slavery, debt bondage, all rolled into one. Going on, as a detective, I came across modern slavery more and more. Not only single cases, but also multiple cases, whereby you have one worker being put into a legitimate company by exploiters purely to earn money for the exploiters by paying rent, etc. And numerous times they are left with £5, £10 a week. And from the outside, hi guys, can you still hear me? I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, sorry, I just lost you then, but you seem back with us, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, good, thank you. I didn't press a button, wasn't me. Sarah will tell you I'm not very good with IT, so I don't know what happened there. Anyway, yeah, so shared experiences. The first one, which you can see there, was we got called to a part of our checks and Staffline is we look for evidence of potential exploitation, which normally leads to modern slavery. Exploitation can be all sorts of forms, but one of the easiest things to look for is where a worker has the shared telephone number or the shared bank account, or even the same address with other workers, either with you or that you know of. In this particular case, we had a 35-year-old male who shared the same telephone number and address of 4 or 5 other workers. And part of our policy and process is to check for this. And on further checks, I deemed it necessary to investigate further. What I came across was a 35-year-old Bulgarian male who was in the top 15 of world boxers for his weight, I think light middleweight from memory. He was registered with the International Boxing Federation. I say he was one of the top 15 in the world, in Europe and in the world. When I saw him, he was half the weight that he was. He was disheveled, classic signs that you've heard all about. And there he was, sat in front of me, head bowed and very hard to communicate with me. We also then identified and interviewed workers who shared the same phone number as him. Long story short, we found out that the person who was exploiting and trafficking this professional boxer was a 19-year-old female Bulgarian. She had been taking his money. She had been telling him where to work. She had been telling him where to live. And she had been telling him to give her all his money. She also worked at the same place. And she was sat there with gold jewelry, top designer clothes, beautiful hair, beautiful makeup, very confident. And when I handed it over to the local police force, she had 5 workers who she was also exploiting in the same way. So don't think that these perpetrators are big, hairy monster men who are walking around or driving around in push cars, minibuses full of workers. This was a 19-year-old Bulgarian female who, through her influence and threats, was able to control an ex-professional boxer. Subsequently, she was arrested for modern slavery and went through the criminal proceedings. The young man involved, the boxer involved, I'm still in contact with now, and I have regular updates from him. And he phones me on my personal number many occasions just to let me know how he gets on. He's back training, and he's boxing in the veteran leagues, etc. Second one is more close to home, and for me is more, if it can be possible, more shocking than other. We had a mother and daughter Ukrainian refugees who came over under the refugee scheme for Ukrainians, and was given a over middle-aged 70-year-old Northamptonshire couple were sponsors for this daughter and mother. Our team at the site they worked recognised that something wasn't quite right. The mother became very withdrawn, became very upset, was constantly crying, and on speaking to her, it turned out that this 70-year-old Middle England, middle class, elderly couple were exploiting them both. When they got dropped off at their house, the following day, this elderly couple took these two to the local job centre. They signed them up for universal credit, which was their entitled to as refugees, and then encouraged them to go to work. The house was lovely, a large detached house in rural Northamptonshire. However, they were told they could not go to the kitchen unless a member of the household was there. They were told that the kitchen was alarmed, and that if they went to the kitchen, again, over these hours, then the alarm would go off and the police were called. Long story short, they actually found work through us. We've managed to identify the problem, and this couple were reported to the Home Office and reported to the local authority. Whilst being investigated by the Home Office and local authority, this elderly couple wrote to the Ukrainian embassy and telling them that this mother and daughter owed them £2,500 in rent. So even after being investigated, they still were trying to exploit this couple. So again, it's what you have to look out for. You have to be careful of something not quite right. And you think it's not right, then look into it. And the third one example is not so much exploitation but evidence of potential exploitation. We had a report of a man who, as part of his work, had to wear Wellington boots as a cleaner. And when he took his Wellington boots, he left a trail of bloody footprints going down the washroom. Turned out that both his feet were very badly infected, and straight away our on-site team suggested may well he's been exploited, because many exploited workers are forced to go into work no matter what their condition. If they're unwell, they will still be sent to work, because that's how the exploiters get their money. However, we were able to speak to him eventually. He had been threatened with being kicked out of his flat, And together with the local agencies we've involved with, we managed to rehome him, etc. So that's some of the shared experiences. But all I can pass over to you guys is, if you don't think it's quite right or something's not quite right, then find out from persons. Know your workers, know who you're working with. Get somebody to get to know the workers. If there's a supervisor at the site or factory, get them to know them. Any slight differences, speak to them and give them the confidence to speak out. Because without us knowing about it, without them telling us or showing the signs, it goes under the radar and gets through.
So just to lead on from that, from Chris, thank you, my dear, is what he said there, this knowing the signs. In Staffline, we have red flags, and those are consistently trained through our staff. We share them with our supply chain as well. And it's invaluable, isn't it, Chris, to be able to get those bits of information, because it is about having a gut feel and feeling confident that you can speak to somebody and report it, even if you think, am I being ridiculous? Is this, something or nothing? We'd always rather, within Staffline, check and make sure, have something logged. And that for us comes onto the ability to reflect and learn from these cases. We log all of our cases, we liaise with the authorities on a regular basis. So often we'll be called in to, present evidence months down the line. But even, for any business, if you have a case where you have modern slavery or suspected modern slavery, there's a real opportunity to learn and to improve, because in every case, even for us, and we've been doing this now for a number of years within Staffline, I think 20 plus, is that right, Chris?
Yeah.
We'll do a 360 review. We have every case logged on a timeline. We get the relevant teams involved. We try and ask, sort of ourselves a set of questions to ensure that we're having sort of, a regular, thorough thought process on what we're discussing, what we're experiencing, are the commonalities in these cases that we've seen. What else can we do as a business to safeguard ourselves, our teams, our workers? Because it's not just at point one, is it? It's making sure that everyone in our organisation is safe. And then it's making sure that we put those things into place and update policies and have appropriate communication. We get training modules out to all of our staff. The workers have a worker appropriate set of training modules, and then throughout our business they are tweaked and refined to ensure that the right people know the right information. And again, those regular updates, we've got the 7 red flags. They're short, they're sharp, they're appropriate, and we don't want them to be long-winded. They need to be effective, be able to be remembered, but sort of what policies have changed as well, what legislation's changed, and just general insights. We get those shared around our company really regularly, so that's really important. But the most important thing, as you could probably tell, Chris is very personable, and his role in what we do has been invaluable. Having somebody that's a dedicated investigator that anybody within the business can pick up the phone to and just have a chat, just run an idea across their desk and say, what do you think? And Chris's experiences and his history and the type of person he is means that we have had so many more cases reported to us. We have that dedicated team and people know that they can pick up the phone. So if you can, make sure you've got somebody as a point of contact in your company. Next slide, please. So the joyous bit is the legal and compliance. Why is this important? So depending on what sectors you're supplying into, the GLAA is the licensing body. It's generally food and food processing. However, if you do use labour, and you will arrange that labour and you will give them instructions in those sectors, it can also be viable that you need a GLA licence as well. So don't become complacent that just because your supplier has one, that you might not need one. And also making sure that you do your due diligence on the supply chain that you do use to ensure that they have a good modern slavery statement in place, what their policies are you aligned in your thinking of victim remediation and how they do their recruitment policies. But it is really important and critical to a license for the GLAA that you report the 2 points that I've noted on here within 20 days, making sure that your license is up to date. Otherwise that can be revoked quite quickly, and that is not good for anybody's business. But also working alongside some of the other organisations, we work really closely with the Home Office. We've got some fantastic links to make sure that, as we've got applicants coming in from all over the world, are the documentation up to speed with the new changes to the EU settled status policy? Is there anything that we can liaise with the Home Office? And we do on a regular basis, probably 10 to 12 cases of people that are applying in the loopholes of the EU settled status, but making sure that nobody's being exploited, because there are opportunities in every way that exploiters will look at and maximise. And then just making sure that you communicate out effectively. Support from NGOs is invaluable in this topic, and working with your clients. Can't stress it enough. It's really valuable to Staffline that we know who our clients trust, and we have that respect for one another, and we work together on cases to make sure that.
So you've just gone on mute.
I didn't click anything. My hands were.
There you go. Sorry.
I said, unless Chris, is there anything else that you need to add in?
No, like I say, what you just said before. I think, like Sarah says, I have regular updates from the Chief Immigration Officer. The Home Office are checking now right to work. One of the biggest threats to companies now are the right to work checks they're doing. The Home Office are increasingly investigating EU settlement status applications. They are investigating fraudulent EU settlement status applications. So if you have got any European workers working for you and you have checked their right to work, keep checking it, because if they're on a temporary application settlement status, then that's going to run out very, very soon, and they will come knocking. And now they've increased it to £60,000 per worker. Make sure that every worker who works for you guys is there legally, especially if it's a non-UK worker. And the Gangmaster and Labour Abuse Authority, the Labour government have just announced that they're going to amalgamate 3 different units together to look at workers' rights. And workers' rights will also mean illegal activity from employers. So they will be looking at that very, very strongly. The GLA have increased their remit now, not just to look for workers in their sector, the food, shellfish, agriculture, but also labour abuse in other sectors, including healthcare and across the board. So the Labour have their intention is to look at this, look at employers' rights, and therefore they're going to look at employees and employers very, very closely. And that's what I've been told regularly in all my meetings, is that watch out, because the authorities are going to come and look at, especially if you deal with fixed term contracts basis, 0-hour contracts, as they call it. The Labour are going to come and look and make sure you're doing everything to protect the employees of yours.
It is also worth noting that if you do work with the GLAA licensed provider, that if there are any concerns within the licensed sector, the GLAA have the power to look beyond those sectors, which opens up doors and concerns in lots of other areas. And I've always worked in the GLAA licensed sectors. It's great, there are rules in place, but it does make sure that you're working with people that you have a lot of faith and trust in. So just to quickly run through some hints and tips: embed your checks on modern slavery. Like Chris said earlier, those shared phone numbers, shared details. Why are they sharing the bank accounts? Is that normal? I mean, I don't like to share with my husband. I just like to spend his money, but making sure that it's legitimate and it's reasonable. Make modern slavery a standing agenda item. Make sure everybody from your board level to your operational staff understand why it's so important to them, because it could happen to anybody that they know. Keep the subject alive, keep it vibrant, and keep, your sort of finger on the pulse. Spend some time finding out the contact is with your suppliers. Chris and I work with a lot of our supply chain. We'll go out to meetings, we sort of align what their objectives are, what they want by the end of it, and it builds a massive amount of trust that we're all on the same page. Display literature, obviously we work with a multilingual, very diverse workforce, so making sure that they understand in various different ways, illustrations, different languages, videos, what their rights are, who they can talk to inside and outside of the organisation is really important. And making sure that we share key learnings. Some of the NGO information that I've had in the past has been key to me thinking that's really useful. And then sharing that on builds a knowledge base that we can all benefit from, because if we can stamp out this horrific crime, we'll all be better for it. So just make sure you reflect. And I think that should be the final bit.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I was about to say we've got to bring Jade in very soon, but thank you. I didn't want to rush any of those slides because it's such an important topic that you're talking about and it's so useful. And just a note to members that we will share this presentation as well with all members. So don't rush, don't be panicking to make notes. This will all be available post call on the portal. Yes, thank you ever so much. Chris and Sarah, thank you. Like I say, please, we've got question time at the end. But what I wanted to do now, and I want to be fair to Jade, Jade needs her allotted time. Jade is an SRAG member. Like I say, we sat with Jade on a fairly recent charter mark assessment and we found out some of this information that we feel we really want her to share with you as fellow SRAG members. So Jade, over to you. Please unmute yourself and come on board.
Thank you very much, Craig, and thank you everybody for having me today. So I'm Smart's HR and Shared Services Director, and I also head up modern slavery. Thank you. Next slide, Craig. So I just wanted to cover today who we are as a business and how our modern slavery journey began. Some practical prevention and detection methods that I think will really build on what's been said already today, which is fantastic. Our supply chain and our detection response, so the output that we've seen and how we're evolving. Thank you. So we are mainly a labour provider, predominantly into the waste and recycling sector. Established back in 2007. We've got around 5,000 flexible employees engaged on a daily basis, and 270 full-time employees across the UK. Thank you. So our journey began, you could stay there, Craig, it doesn't matter either way, I'll just talk through this bit. So back in 2015, beginning of, I not long joined the business, so I've been here a long time now. We had a notification from West Midlands Police that our workforce had been infiltrated by some criminal gangs. And they came to us to ask for help in trying to pin them down, essentially, and to obtain data. So at that point, we didn't know what modern slavery was. It was way before the Modern Slavery Act. It wasn't something that was talked about within our work streams, with our clients or in our supply chain. And I think that's a very sort of fair sort of scenario for a lot of businesses at that time, sort of nearly 10 years ago. And we went through a real journey, particularly with West Midlands Police, in regards to a really difficult time of knowing we'd got criminal activity taking place within our workforce and not being able to do anything about it. But that journey was an incredible amount of learning of how to prevent and detect at that stage. And from that point, from having that first interaction, we went on quite a rapid but very effective journey to implement some real key processes and procedures within our business. So I wanted to talk through some of those with you now, so that you can see what you could implement within your business if you've got gaps or areas that you feel you could do more in. So first of all, we have a suite of IT reports that run on a weekly basis. And similar to what Staffline spoken to us about, they look for duplicate bank and duplicate addresses. So they're picking up where people are using the same bank account and details, or that we've got multiple occupancy residences. We also have a large database of data that's been collated from police forces across the UK that tells us where there are known criminals or known individuals that we might need to be mindful of or have a little bit of a further look at. So our IT reports run every week against any new starter that joins our business to see if they match that blacklist address that the police have essentially said, do not interact with these individuals. We have a suspect names report, which is similar to the one that the police have given us. This is a compilation of an Excel spreadsheet, essentially, that I've got over 1,000 lines of data on now, that all new starters cross-match against that spreadsheet to see if there's any matches and to see if there's any further investigation that we need to conduct. And we look at our next of kin reports. We do phone numbers as well. The next of kin name is really key, because we often find that somebody will say, oh, Adam got me the job, you know, repeatedly, it's the same name. And often we'll see that maybe that one individual Adam could be somebody's brother, father, cousin, friend, but it ends up being the same person every time. So that's a newer report that we've added in with the next of kin name as well as phone number match, so that we can try and identify if we've got any correlation there. Pre-employment checks are carried out on all of our permanent employees. We know that unfortunately our permanent employees are a target to being bribed. So we make sure that we do pre-employment checks to see if any of our permanent employees might be at risk of exploitation themselves or being put in a position where they're being asked to exploit others. Our training is quite, I like to think it's quite thorough and robust. So we have all of our new permanent employees go through a rigorous training process in regards to modern slavery during their induction. We also have an online web-based training, which is conducted by Slave Free Alliance. For areas of the UK that police forces tell us are hotspots, our staff in that particular area of those particular areas get specific training that's tailored to them. And all of our flexible employees receive training. For a lot of victims of modern slavery, they don't necessarily know they're a victim. When they come to the UK and they're working in the conditions that we operate here, those conditions may be better than the ones that they were used to in the country they've come from. So it's not always obvious to them that something is wrong or that they're being treated in an unfair manner. So it's really key that we give them training so they can self-identify or identify others, either colleagues or others in their communities. We have a confidential helpline. So this is operated 24 hours a day, and somebody can make a phone call or they can email or they can do a confidential Dropbox in the location that they're working in. And we refresh marketing material on an annual basis. So it's not a poster on a wall that lives there for years. Every year we change the way that marketing looks to ensure that everybody is seeing fresh information. It's got all of the support numbers on it in lots of different languages. So that's really key for us as well. One of the bits of marketing that I like the most, or I think is really effective, is the bathroom stall posters. You might have started to see these sort of over the last couple of years if you go to a service station or in the airport. We issued these way back when, years and years ago, to say, look, it's probably one of the only places in a work location where you're on your own, particularly in a waste facility. So it's a space where you can call and say, I'm in the red stall at X site, I need help. So I find those to be really, really useful. As you would expect, we've got a lot of robust policies and procedures in place, including an internal escalation process for our staff. And we carry out rigorous internal auditing. So this is internal auditing from a workforce perspective on documentation, but also in terms of our account managers and how they're operating on site, to our supply chain. Just on the documentation of our workforce, I think it's really important to say that a lot of victims of modern slavery are legal workers. So the two things don't necessarily go hand in hand, that if you've got a victim of modern slavery that they will be an illegal worker, or vice versa. The majority of victims of modern slavery that I've identified over the years have been working legally in the UK. And certainly over the last sort of 5 years plus, where criminal gangs have become aware that we are looking a lot more at the documentation and that we've got a much greater awareness of modern slavery risks, it's very difficult. It would be very easy for us to identify things if they were illegal workers, because we'd see it on their documentation straight away. So it's really important just to make sure we're not putting those two and two together every time. One doesn't equal the other. We've got a lot of strong corporate partnerships. So those have been mentioned earlier in regards to Slave Free Alliance, GLAA, SRAG. It's really important for us to have those, and collaborative working is really, really key. I say all the time in all the talks I do on this topic, we could not do the work we do without key collaboration. And it'd be really great if off the back of this call today that we get to collaborate with some more businesses. That would be fantastic. I mentioned the police partnerships we have. We're always looking to broaden the scope of these. We've got a lot of really strong relationships across forces around the UK, but I'm always looking to do more of that. We have an internal undercover team. So this is a team of individuals that go around our facilities that our workforce aren't necessarily used to seeing as a sort of a manager on site. So they come in, they pose as another worker, they work alongside the workforce, they speak in their first language, and they just try to pick up some elements or identifiers that our account management team may not see during registration or kind of morning roll call or starting the shift or end of the shift. It's really important that undercover team just get that extra level of insight. We find that to be really useful. We operate a probation review for our flexible employees. So again, this is just another step for our account managers to be able to pick up any identifying factors that might be a concern. We have a team of modern slavery champions across the UK. So these individuals look to keep conversation fresh around modern slavery, keep our workforce talking about it and keeping it at the forefront of everybody's minds. I've mentioned the key collaboration, that's really, really important for us. And the supplier guide and supplier auditing I've mentioned, I will come on to in a little bit. Thank you, Craig. So we know that our supply chain is our biggest risk, particularly where we're operating with second-tier labour providers. We've done some mapping of the supply chain to identify key focus areas, and we carry out an annual supplier audit. With the second-tier labour providers, they have a weekly check that's also carried out on their workforce so that we can ensure that we're taking every step possible, essentially, to go further into the supply chain, particularly where labour is involved. We have a supplier code of conduct, and we continue to enhance that and make sure it's fit for purpose. And we have a supplier guide. So for all of our suppliers, they're issued with a guide to modern slavery. And when that is refreshed and renewed, they receive an updated copy. And they're also given access to support and resources and training that we can provide to them if necessary. Thank you. So in terms of detecting modern slavery. So what do we do if we believe that there is a risk somewhere in the business or that we might have a concern? For all of our teams on the ground across the UK, we have an incident response pack. So this allows them to get things in place very quickly if they feel they've identified somebody that is at risk. It gives them access to get food and amenities for the individual, or to book accommodation for them if it's not safe for them to leave the workplace. Sometimes when we're working with the police, we have differing time frames. It depends how urgent the need is or how quickly the police can get to us. Sometimes it's necessary for us to provide accommodation or put somebody up in a hotel, and to save having to go through sort of normal channels of approval processes for our account management teams. This incident support pack gives them instant access to be able to help somebody without having to go through sort of the normal checks that you'd expect when sort of booking accommodation. We commit to our clients and internally that if we identify somebody that we feel is at risk, that we will conduct a face-to-face welfare interview within 24 hours. The individuals that conduct those have been trained by ex-police to conduct those interviews, and that allows us to identify the risk points if it's modern slavery, and depending on what the outcome of the interview is, where we're going to refer them to next. So the NRM through an appropriate channel, the police, or maybe to another support function. We also have the ability to have analysis of our work locations assessed by an external specialist, and we do this across the board on an annual basis. And as you'd expect, we set out our aims and objectives in our modern slavery statement. And with our statement, this is really good practice for every business producing a statement, or even if you don't legally have to, I would suggest having one. It's really worthwhile not being afraid to set out your gaps and where you want to get to over the next 12 months. Rather than it just being a sort of a list of everything you do, really get yourself kind of a real framework in there of everything that you want to achieve, your risk areas, and how you're going to implement those. So you've got a real record year on year of how you're tracking. Thank you.
Well, 5 minutes until we have questions, Jay. You're doing really good there.
All right.
Thank you.
So just in terms of output, so looking at the things that we have seen as a result of the work we've done on modern slavery. So our employees successfully identify victims and perpetrators. That's really key. They are our eyes and ears, our boots on the ground. There's no good me doing all this work sat here, at my desk, if we didn't have our individuals who could pick this up, because I would never do it on my own. So they're really key, and they do it really successfully, and we're really proud of the work that they do and the commitment they have to this. Our workers reach out for help, which is fantastic. That means that the education that we're giving them and the on-site marketing is working. We've gained a presence in local communities, so we've had experiences of people who don't work for us coming into our branches and offices and saying, I've heard you're smart, I need help, I've heard you've helped people with modern slavery, please can you help me? So people that we don't already know, and that's fantastic for us, because that means our workforce is talking to their communities and their further networks. We run a victim rehabilitation programme, so we successfully relocate victims of modern slavery and get them back into work elsewhere. And as I've mentioned, we actively support police inquiries. So just in terms of evolution, the things we need to be aware of. So perpetrators are becoming smarter day by day. The typical signs that sort of 5+ years ago we would have been looking out for, being dropped off in a van round the corner and being, coming dishevelled or smelling or not having any lunch or sitting alone. Those things are still important to look for, but they're not the usual anymore. So you have to be a lot smarter in terms of the kind of reporting mechanisms or the automatic reports you run and the training that you're giving people, because these perpetrators know what we're looking for and they will do everything they can to try and comply with our standards, essentially. Our internal staff are under threat. I mentioned that earlier. The compliance documents are much easier to falsify with improvements to technology, and with the changes to immigration systems, it's a lot easier to get certain types of visas, particularly a student visa and a family and friends visa. It's very easy to get those now. So it's really important. Like I say, somebody could be working legitimately from a legal perspective, from a right to work perspective, but that doesn't mean that they won't be a victim of modern slavery. And the victim profiles are changing. So we talked a little bit earlier about the numbers of British individuals that are victims being sort of top of the list. And we're seeing a lot more females as well. So again, 5+ years ago, predominantly victims of modern slavery were male. We're seeing a lot more females now, and that's something for us to be mindful of when we're looking for this crime within our business. Thank you. So lastly, I just want to sort of leave this with you: to tackle, prevent and improve. That's something that sort of I live by in this practice of dealing with modern slavery, and I'd like to leave that with you today to take away to your businesses. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Jade, and thank you ever so much, Chris and Sarah. I think we'll all agree that content was so rich and so informative. So thank you ever so much. I'm going to stop sharing now, and like I say, we've got these last kind of 5-6 minutes for questions to the panel. And what we'll do with Jade's approval, I haven't asked you this, Jade, if you're happy to, we'll do a LinkedIn kind of thread on our group as well. So we'll tag Jade into a post there, and if there's any questions we don't get time for now, we'll make sure we get those on there as well. But yeah, thank you.
I've got one from the chat. Can I start off?
Yes, let's go with that, please. Yeah, let's go.
It's for Jade, this one. So you talked about the list of kind of people that were recognised as having been involved in kind of, you know, perpetrators of modern slavery that you get from the police. And we've got Lindsay, I think it is. Lindsay, I can't see where you're from, so apologies for that. But just if we can give some advice on how companies can get hold of these lists to avoid those people, that would be good.
What I would say on that list is we've got that because we've been infiltrated and because the police have needed our support in order to provide them with intelligence as well. So what I would suggest is you know, if you contact the police and say, can you give me a list, they're not going to give you one. No. So what I would suggest doing is just starting to compile your own spreadsheet of data that you can run reports against. So, and you know, when I've referenced this 1,000 lines of data, that isn't every single person on there has been a victim or a perpetrator, but it's every time that there's been some sort of suspicion or something didn't seem quite right. Yeah. So things like that, try and compile data as much as you can that you can then use. And also, if you know, it's very difficult to share data, obviously, under DPA legislation. But if we ever get to this place, which we are working hard to do with various channels where we can share some more data, open yourself up to the opportunity to do that as well as soon as you can, if that becomes a possibility.
Thanks. I was going to say, before we open up to some more questions, Chris, did you have anything else to add? Because I know you've kind of seen it from the other side as well. Just whether you wanted to add anything in there.
Yeah, I agree with what Jade says. One with most regions now have anti-modern slavery networks. I know we're members of, throughout the UK, different area regions like West Yorkshire, West Midlands, North Yorkshire. If you've got a query about that, contact your local authority, because they will be part of that network, and see if you can get an invite to the next one. Because normally there's police forces who are doing their little bit. And I know on the West Midlands, for instance, network, every meeting, there's a West Midlands police officer there who updates you, like Jade said, on new trends, who they should be looking out for. Although they can't name names, they can tell you what the current trends are in this particular sector. So that's what I'd add to what Jade said, really.
So just adding on to that, if I can, I keep a tab on the court cases, and obviously just in the media of anybody that's been arrested and charged. And obviously, as Jade said, those next of kin, those other connections, just keeping tabs on those that you have any suspicions about can pay wonders. Ultimately, it's all about safeguarding our workforces, isn't it?
Yes, thank you. Thank you ever so much. Again, we've got a couple of minutes. I know we are really cutting it fine for time. Is there anyone like can ask a question? I haven't got my countdown timer with me for the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like I say, we're happy to take this and carry this over to our LinkedIn page as well. I think we'll all agree, I could see some virtual kind of clapping going on when Jade was finished, but I think we will all agree, Chris, Sarah, Jade, your expertise and your passion in this area has really, really shone through. And I'm so happy that I'm not happy that we've had to this lunch and learn, because it's a really difficult topic to talk through, but I'm happy that as an SRAG we've tackled this, and this is origin from, like I say, a Chartmark conversation. I know personally my knowledge on this has improved massively over this hour, so again, encourage you, if you're an SRAG member and you want access to the portal or you haven't got that yet, please do reach out to myself or Lydia. We'll make sure you've got that portal login. You can share that with colleagues as well then. So again, you may be on this call thinking this is brilliant, but I'm not the best person for this. Please do just reach out. We'll make sure you've got colleagues who've got access and can access this wonderful information. So I will, as we're coming to very, very close to 2 o'clock, I just want to say one last huge thank you to our speakers. Appreciate how busy you all are. Special mention to Sarah as well. Sarah, I hope you don't mind me sharing. Second day back from maternity leave break. So what a restart back to the working world. Yeah. So thank you, Sarah. A year out on maternity and then back with this huge topic to tackle. So thank you so much. But Chris, Jade, we couldn't have done it without you. Your information and your knowledge was superb. So thank you. And last but not least, thank you ever so much for joining. Please do reach out to us if you're not an SRAG member, you want to know a little bit more, you want this to be a regular thing. These lunch and learns are at least once a month. So again, please just reach out to us. I'll pop my email in the chat now. But yes, thank you ever so much for attending. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and thank you again to our brilliant speakers. Thanks all.
Brilliant. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.